Hi, I'm Laura Flanders. With all the uprisings, strikes, and blockades taking place in recent years, some would argue that we as a country are more ready for change than ever. There are many different opinions about what that change might look like, but comprehensive health care, environmental protection, and job creation are major points of discussion. The Green New Deal put forth by the U.S. Green Party seeks to address each of those issues and perhaps go a little further than the original New Deal. The party is also involved in the creation of a shadow government, which was announced this Earth Day. With waters rising and temperatures going up, is there time to break the two-party system? Is there time not to? To fill us in on that and more, our guest today is Jill Stein, 2012 presidential candidate for the Green Party in the USA. Jill, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you, Laura.
Let's start with the story of now. Where are we at? How do you look at this moment?
You know, with a recent UN report basically saying that 2/3 of all ecological systems that our economy and our lives depend on for food, water, energy, you name it, 2/3 of those systems are either, going over a cliff or they're being profoundly degraded. So, this doesn't go on. We're living on borrowed time right now. And, in the last 2 years, we've seen the worst storms, the worst drought, the worst heat. We have fires in California now that normally you see at the end of a very long, hot, dry summer. We're now seeing them in the spring. Superstorm Sandy, the last 2 years have been the worst record billion-dollar storms that we've ever had. And the real writing on the wall is this. 80% of all warming that's occurred has happened just since 1980. This has been going on for a century and a half, since the beginning of the industrial era, but it's just in these last couple of decades that it's really taking off. What does that tell us? That tells us this is really accelerating. And in fact, the science tells us we've had less than 1 degree centigrade of warming, but we'll have somewhere between 2 and 4 degrees by 2050. This is clearly not livable. Forget, the landmarks that the science is telling us, because 2 years from now, they will say those are all obsolete.
We know in New York that the estimates that they made just a few years ago about how many people live in the floodplain in New York City,
that's right.
Well, by the new estimates, they're saying the number of us living in the floodplain is double or will be double by 2020 than we thought.
And Jim Hansen, the foremost climate scientist, basically called the question about how rapidly sea level is going to rise. The science traditionally said, oh, don't worry about Greenland, it'll take thousands of years. But Hansen has pointed out that actually the speed at which it's melting is doubling every 5 to 10 years, and that we could see it break up, not over a century, not over a matter of millennia, but over a matter of decades.
All right, so the good news on this, as you said earlier before we went to camera, was that this feels like a sort of wake-up moment with respect to the Green Party.
And I think, it has everything to do with the fact that we are at the breaking point. And, the bottom line is that we can turn the breaking point into a tipping point if we decide to do that. As Alice Walker points out, biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We know how to fix the economy. It's not rocket science. It's been done before. We can do what the New Deal did and more and fix not only unemployment, joblessness, the declining wages of workers, etc., the lack of benefits and retirement, which is another crisis on the horizon, student debt. We can fix it all like that. It's not rocket science. The question is, do we have a democracy or not? And what polls tell us in poll after poll is that the large majority of Americans supports this agenda of creating jobs, of healthcare as a human right, of ending student debt.
You put out an ad last year during the election campaign called What is Green? To try to explain some of this to people. Let's take a look.
What does green mean?
Green means corporations are not people and money is not speech. Green means community banks and credit unions, not banks that are too big to fail. Green means small business and co-ops, not Walmart or Wall Street.
Green means a better life for all of us. I'm Jill Stein, Green Party candidate for president.
I'm Sherry Honkaluk, Green Party vice presidential candidate.
So what is green is also this new Green Deal. What's in it?
It is taking power, it is democracy. And the Green New Deal, in fact, would create 25 million jobs. It would end unemployment, and these are public jobs, government jobs that fill the gap where the private sector has not and will not create those jobs.
Now, you're not making this up out of whole cloth. That was the program under FDR, government jobs.
Exactly, exactly. And this would create those jobs, particularly in the green areas of the economy, so that it not only solves the economic crisis, it also solves the climate crisis at the same time. Jobs in clean renewable energy and conservation and weatherization and wind and solar and manufacturing and local sustainable agriculture, public transportation, infrastructure, ecosystem restoration.
How do you do it? Where does the revenue come from?
Piece of cake, actually. Let's tax Wall Street. Let's cut the military in half and have a foreign policy based on human rights and international law, not on militarism and the procurement of oil resources.
Last year I had a chance to interview Robert Pollin, the economist credited with really first laying out the plan for the financial transaction tax, or the good folks over at the National Nurses United call it the Robin Hood tax.
Yes.
Here's what he had to say about job creation and the relative benefits of investing in school teachers and in the military. Robert Pollin.
One of the big things government does is spend on education. That is a very good source of job creation. So for $1 million, public, it could be private schools, but it's mostly public, you'll create 27 jobs spending $1 million. Government also does the military. If the government spends $1 million on the military, you'll create about 11 jobs. So this is actually a huge difference. You create 2.5 times more jobs spending on education, the government, than they do spending on the military. If you only are concerned about job creation, you would be shifting the money out of the military and into education to create more job opportunities.
That was Robert Pollin speaking on Grit TV earlier last year. It gets in my mind to the political question, because the sorts of changes you're talking about, yes, you say they're a piece of cake, but in this country, unlike even the UK, it's been very hard to have any movement, even on something like this small transaction tax, because of the power of Wall Street in Congress. How do you get around that? And what's your response to Bill McKibben and others these days who say the flip side of your urgency argument around the environment is we don't have time to break the two-party system?
So let me just add to, it's the influence of Wall Street in Congress as well as the influence of Wall Street in the White House, which has been wall-to-wall Wall Street, so to speak. By standing up for an agenda for people, peace, and the planet, if we focus on small change, we're going to have small support for it. But you've got 1 out of every 2 Americans in poverty, 1 out of 3 young African-American men who are in prison on parole or probation. You have 37 million students who are indentured servants, who are in debt without jobs to pay back that debt. And you know, the Labor Department is saying that 9 out of 10 jobs coming online are low wage and insecure. Half of them do not even require a high school diploma. So we've been engineered into an incredible economic crisis, and you've got the President's Trans-Pacific Partnership coming online here. You put those groups together and you have, you know, a rebellion that cannot be stopped. In fact, that rebellion is already in full swing, which gets back to the political point. This is about recognizing the power that we already have and how we bring that power together, how we converge these very powerful movements and make them unstoppable, is by not going for the window dressing, you know, not going for the fringe reforms here, but by really fixing the problem. We don't have a choice because we really are up against the wall on the economy, on jobs, on the climate, on our survival.
All right, so how do we do it? I was just in Appalachia a few weeks ago, and there you have a lot of people who feel that big government and regulators and big environment have put them out of business. I'm talking mostly about coal miners. How do you develop class solidarity in this green plan of yours?
Well, what's really exciting is that class solidarity is actually emerging, and there are labor unions around the world who in fact are taking the lead now. I think there's a lot of dialogue going on right now. There's incredible soul searching going on, because you know, we are in a rapidly shifting landscape right now, and people realize that this devastation is coming home to low-income people, to poor people, and that workers are really caught in the target hairs. They are being very actively recruited by the fossil fuel industry, which is trying to lure them with high wages. But in fact, these jobs are high risk. They have high mortality rates. They subject the workers to real dangers on fracking, for example. And they come and they go. The tar sands, for example, is going to create all of 20 permanent jobs, according to our State Department.
But to go back to Appalachia again for a minute, here you have miners. Many of them have lost their jobs underground. They have taken whatever jobs remain, which in the case of miners are in strip mining, mountaintop removal. They know it's not long-term. They know it's not good for their water, their air. Some of them will tell you that. But what are their choices? And how do we, as progressive people who owe a debt to those parts of the country that have fueled our industrial economy, how do we build bridges with those folks so that they don't just feel, hey, it's not big corporations that are paying the price for your regulation. It's me. Big corporations will always find big lawyers. I'm the one feeling the regulatory
that's why the
heat.
solution is not regulation. The solution is actually a transformative economic shift from the Wall Street economy that we have, which is going to keep screwing workers and poor people and African Americans. It will continue, and ordinary middle class Americans who are joining the ranks of the impoverished. This is exactly why small change around the margins isn't going to do it. Simply having EPA step up to its regulatory power is not going to fix this, because poor people are going to be forced to take the horrible jobs, to mow down the trees, to deforest the Amazon, as long as we have a Wall Street economy. We need fundamentally an economic shift. This is why we are calling for economic and ecological transformation. The way to reduce the deficit is actually by creating jobs and jumpstarting the economy. That's what the American people want. So all this keeps coming back to claiming our democracy, which is what the Green Party is about. It's about stepping up to that agenda, which includes, of course, a just transition. This is not about dumping workers in the fossil fuel industry out in the cold, but ensuring that they will have economic support, that they will have living wages, and they will have retraining, and they will be tided over while we are there's actually no time to tide over. We need to put them to work right now, greening the economy.
So will you right here, right now, say something to the coal miners who just got completely dissed by their former employer, Patriot Coal, a company that has walked away from 20,000 miners and their pensions and retirement plans and health care? They're represented by the United Mine Workers, but I've barely seen coverage, and I've not seen any response from those who talk about transition.
Yes. This is why we call for a Green New Deal to actually put everyone to work. So let's put those mine workers to work right now on ecological restoration, on restoring the ecosystems and the rivers that have been poisoned by the by the mountaintop removal. There is so much for us to do on ecosystem transformation, or I should say restoration, on rebuilding our roads and bridges, which we saw up in Washington State just a couple weeks ago. And there are hundreds and thousands of bridges that are at least as much at risk. Yeah. So we have work to be done right now. There need be no layoff and long period of unemployment. I think it's time for us all to stand up together, maybe on the same day, and show how incredible the power of this movement for people, peace, and the planet actually is.
The day that people have stood up for the environment historically is Earth Day.
Yes.
This Earth Day you announced, or you were part of the announcement around a shadow cabinet, shadow government. What's that going to be doing? What is that doing?
So that's an outgrowth of our campaign. During the campaign, we had tried to create a cabinet. It's very hard to do that while you're running. So afterwards, Sherry Honkala, my illustrious running mate, who is one of the co-founders of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, which is a wonderful coalition. We said, let's keep this going, and we created out of the cabinet this independent, technically it's nonpartisan, it includes independents, socialists, lefties of all sorts, anarchists.
Lots of good TV regulars.
Yes, exactly.
It Wolf, includes Margaret Flowers.
Yes, Kevin Zeese, Ben Mansky is our chief of staff. Go to greenshadowcabinet.us and you will see the government that you deserve, the government that's actually on your side, not sort of the curse of your, of your daily, your daily struggle.
So how did you get into this, and what keeps you so incredibly fired up and energetic?
I got into this as a mother and a medical doctor, and in the medical clinic where I had, I've worked for decades up until a few years ago, and basically I moved from clinical medicine. When people ask me what kind of medicine do you do now, I say political medicine because it's the mother of all illnesses, and we've got to fix that political system in order to fix all the other things that are killing us. And that was basically my experience as a medical doctor. I realized I didn't feel good giving people pills that were making them go broke anyhow, and then sending them back out to the very things that were making them sick, everything from air pollution to a sick food system, a passive transportation system that makes us couch potatoes and pollutes us as we go. So, I began to work on the upstream solutions, but realized they were absolutely blocked. You could not move them forward unless you challenged power. At that point, the Green Party actually came to me and said, what you're talking about is our agenda. Why don't you just keep doing the same thing and call it a political campaign, run for governor? I did. I debated Mitt Romney back in 2002 and was actually declared the winner in the instant online viewer poll. And for me, it was so exhilarating to see that our point of view, which we're told is, oh, that's marginal, that's the lunatic fringe, it's actually where the American public is. And when you run for office, you are a public servant, and you go around, you talk to everybody who wants to talk to you. And I began to see, whether we were talking to Tea Partiers, people on the right, old Republicans, lefties, we had a really common agenda.
What will it take to get you into the debates this next time around, or any Green Party candidate? We just recently interviewed Ralph Nader and were reminded what a nightmare he went through, and you were excluded totally.
And in fact, locked up, handcuffed to a chair in a detention center for 8 hours until the debate was over. So they go to great lengths to silence debate, and it's not only the big debates; it's the corporate muzzled media as well. And I think the question of what will it take is the same question as what will it take for us to have health care? What will it take for us not to go down in flames and to get a generation of students out of indentured servitude? And when all those what will it takes come together around our common agenda for people, peace, and the planet, that is all it takes.
Jill Stein of Green Party. You can get more information at our website.